not a cross-examination, but a 20-minute period of open discussion. Now, what I thought I'll do is just start out by maybe just throwing a topic in there, and you guys could pick it up from there if that's all right. So I'll reset the clock to just 20 minutes. Now, of course, remember, for those of you just tuning in, you can, of course, post your questions in, just tag Modern Day Hysteria, and of course, we'll have a Q&A period right after this. But now, the 20-minute discussion period, I'll begin by letting Standing for Truth have the first say, and then you can pick it up from there. The question I want to throw in as an introductory discussion point is that Snake was right, insisted that the fossil record simply demonstrates, kind of proves his point of view, and if the flood really was an explanation to that, you should see one single layer instead of the different layers that we have now in the fossil record. Does that disprove creation? Let's start with you, Standing for Truth.
Sure, I can certainly address that. I appreciate your rebuttal there. It just seems like everything he said was a lot of storytelling, a lot of imagining, because it seems like, according to him, evolution answers up, down, in and out, living, dying, breathing and not breathing. It just answers everything. I mean, we see entropic degeneration on all levels, all this thousands of mutation-related diseases, and yet the fact that beneficial mutations are rare, and obviously they can't make up or compensate for the information loss, it's still evidence for fish to fisherman evolution. So I find that absurd. But in regards to like I said, fossils, bones found in the dirt, they're not inherited traits are. That's why I look to genetics to demonstrate my model. That's why I've made testable predictions. But at the end of the day, if he wants a testable prediction for, the CPT model, the catastrophic plate tectonics model that I look to explain the geology, I mean, I can give him that, since if he's looking specifically for a testable prediction on that. I mean, is that what you're looking for, Taylor?
Not really. Unless that's been approved by mainstream scientists. But I'm really looking more for something that you can predict that will show up in the fossil layer, which everything about the flood predicts that it would look completely different.
Well, the thing is, if you look to Genesis and you look to our actual flood model, why are we
looking to Genesis at all?
But I'm saying that
if your starting point.
We'll let him just answer that, and then of course I'll pass it back to you, Taylor.
Well, the scope and scale of the energy produced by the flood, according to Genesis, would have been astounding. And the fountains of the great deep breaking up, that's what we look to. So the earth is fractured like an eggshell. Continents are moving vertically, horizontally, and tsunamis, they drive floodwaters onto the continents. The rain is unending, and it's just geologic catastrophism. And that's why all these marine fossils that are found, these clams, they're already at the bottom. So that's why we would see 80% of them are consisting of the actual fossil record. But the thing is, this continent, the continents are moving at rapid paces. It's like a sprint. The evolutionists look to continental drift, but we look to initial continental sprint, and it's through the floodwaters and all this geological havoc. But here's the testable prediction we've made on that, because if we don't make a testable prediction, just like I make testable predictions on pre-existing heterozygosity, we also make testable predictions on the CPT model. And the pre-flood ocean crust is dragged down into the mantle. That's called subduction process. So the testable prediction would be that the cold ocean crust should still be cold, since this occurred only thousands of years ago, even though it has descended into the deep hot mantle. Now, what's amazing is that seismic data, and I can give you this article and the audience the article from NASA, has actually revealed enormous slabs of cool rock under North America. And down in the core itself, which should be warm, this is confirmation of the catastrophic plate tectonics model. So all the phenomenon, everything we see fits that basic hypothesis of catastrophic plate tectonics. I'm not sure what else you could be looking for. Go ahead.
But Snake was right. You were saying that why refer to Genesis, right? You can carry that on.
Yeah.
Well, what do you have to say about the testable prediction that I made? Because if I put forth a model based on Genesis, it's pseudoscience if there's no testable predictions that flow from it. But based on the fact that the pre-flood ocean crust is dragged down into the mantle, which is called subduction process, based on the fountains of the Great Deep breaking open. I'm not sure if you've read the account in Genesis of the fountains of the Great Deep breaking open, but like I said, the Earth is fractured like an eggshell. The continents are moving not only vertically but horizontally. So seismic data from NASA has revealed this, these enormous slabs of cool rock under North America. So that is a confirmed prediction. But like I said, fossils, bones found in the dirt, they're not inherited. Traits are. So if we're looking at the origins of species, which is the name of this debate, we need to look at what is inherited, and traits are inherited. So, I mean, we can continue talking about, you know, flood geology if you want, but I didn't really see any actual evidence being presented for universal common ancestry. So take your time, address what I said. Curious as to your opinion and thoughts on the testable prediction we've made given a model of catastrophic plate tectonics, but I'd like to see your evidence for the origin of species, not just a random change in allele frequency and populations over time, but actual evidence. Go ahead.
All right.
The evidence is in the fact that every population is different in each layer. We wouldn't see that in a flood model, and we wouldn't see 90% of the death being animals that survive in water.
So that, okay, so you're, see, the thing is, fossils, you know, it's just, I've already given you a testable falsifiable prediction based on our model, catastrophic plate tectonics. So, I mean, I don't
not
really.
Unique, though. That's
No,
like predicting that the sun will come up. We
No, no,
already
no.
know that the sun will come up.
No, because that's actually a pretty sufficient prediction and confirmation based on that model. But like I said, I mean, if you're going to look to the fossil record, and even though it's just circumstantial evidence requiring an actual theory to account for the large scale evolution, but all we see is a net loss of information, and the fact that natural selection is severely constrained by selection interference. I mean, how are you gonna, can you give me a few beneficial mutations that are not somewhat deleterious? I mean, how are you gonna build, because if you're looking to it, you know, the lower levels of the simple organisms, and I wouldn't say a trilobite is simple by any means, it's certainly complex, look at the eye, but how are you gonna account for that information buildup? Where's the novelty?
Well, that doesn't actually matter. We can start with, evolution starts with a pre-assembled DNA and cellular mechanism. So we start with genes. So we can just lose information. That's fine. It doesn't matter.
Well, no, because if these beneficial mutations that you agree are rare, and they can seldom make the type of compensation that's needed to stop the net loss of information, you're not gonna, it's like taking 2 steps forward, but then taking 10 steps backward. You're never gonna climb that mountain, and you're never gonna get your fish to fisherman. It's a pseudo-scientific belief, but you can believe in it all you want, Taylor, but I haven't seen any evidence being presented the entire time. You're looking to the fossil record, but bones found in the dirt are not inherited. Traits are. Where's your evidence, genetically speaking? I mean, what do you look to, brother?
You're welcome to check their math, but I just read off to you like 4 or 5 studies where they conclude the exact opposite of what you're saying.
Well, the thing is, you look to, well, for one, I'll go to, you know, those studies and mechanisms, but where's your example of a beneficial mutation? Because I agree that there are mutations that are beneficial given, you know, and they're environmentally dependent, of course. I mean, even looking at, you know, sickle cell anemia, for example, it's still ultimately reductive, but at the end of the day, there is some type of benefit to be had from it. But where's your novel gain in information there, Taylor? Go ahead.
Well, it's context dependent. Not all mutations are going to cause disease in every individual. So you still don't understand how gaining an antifreeze function to your blood is a beneficial mutation?
Well, the thing is, I'm not disagreeing with adaptations, and the thing is, it's funny that the only example you can go to is these notothenioid antifreeze Arctic fish, the antifreeze protein, because all it is a story. They're looking at it, it's already occurred, and they're making judgments and inferences. Where's your real time? And the thing is, you know, it's probably an epigenetic, non-random genetic change. Anyways, these fish go into the cold water, and all of a sudden they have these antifreeze proteins that they develop based on pre-existing genetic adaptation. But where's your actual, you know, observable evidence? Not looking at some story, because I know evolutionists like to imagine and storytell, but you're talking about a trade-off here. You're talking about that it's context dependent, but while the genome is degenerating in many possible ways, Taylor, and while a few nucleotide sites may be improving, based on this context dependent beneficial mutations, huge numbers are being degraded. So this type of trade-off you're talking about, it's obviously not sustainable, as it's still going to result in a shrinking functional genome size. So once again, you can believe in it all you want, and I put a capital B on believe, but it's just a science fiction based religion with no actual empirical evidence. I mean, you still haven't presented us any evidence. You look to some bones found in the dirt. I've given you a testable falsifiable prediction based on our model of catastrophic plate tectonics. Where's your evidence for pond scum to people evolution? Go ahead.
Well, you're kind of all over the place here. So most of these mutations are only slightly deleterious because they're regulatory mutations. So and I cited you several papers that talk about compensatory mutations. So one mutation can up and down regulate all these weird tinkerings that you had and just solve it all. And Dr. Seigart, when he talked with Nephilim, he brought up how birds were losing eyesight function, and then all of a sudden they got a mutation and everything started working better. And that's part of, there's another paper that examines biological systems with anti-fragility and examines how you can mess with the system and it will still have the same functionality.
Well, the thing is, when you look to redundancy in, say, a computer, this backup code, you look at that and think, wow, what incredible design. But when you look at the redundancy in a genome, and let's say there's a mutation in that redundancy, in that backup code, I mean, of course, it's going to be deleterious, and it's evidence of design. And how does natural selection build something like redundancy, this backup code in the genome? When natural selection looks to the short term, but yet these redundant elements are actually built for the long term. So I don't agree that compensating for loss of information is possible at all, Taylor. I mean, I don't think you've demonstrated
with the science.
Well, the thing is, you're saying
what it all comes down to is your guys' whole argument hangs on a conspiracy in the sciences.
Well, no, it's not a conspiracy, because that's what we see: death, degeneration. We see mutations or destruction, not construction. And the thing is, the whole genome is degenerating and throwing out so much information while trying to make up for it with a few beneficial mutations that you're talking about. That's not going to solve the problem. That's wishful thinking.
We actually see the opposite, and we're trying to explain that.
So you're trying to explain that, and you see the opposite, even though we see entropic degeneration on all level. I mean, 12,000 mutation-related diseases. I mean, where's your beneficial mutations in man? We see thousands of Mendelian-related mutations. Can you even give me one that's not somewhat deleterious? I mean, you're not fooling anybody in believing that losing information is going to build your genome. I mean, it's just not even. It's absurd, to say the least.
Imagine you're playing Scrabble and you have you can spell amazing, and you remove a Z and an A, and now you have amazing, and it spells something. It's the same thing. You can duplicate letters and you get more stuff to work with.
Well, the thing is, if you're duplicating an already degenerate gene based on the accumulation of these low impact near neutral mutations, you're probably just going to speed up the degeneration process. And the thing is, if I give you a copy of a book that you already own, and the thing is you start introducing typographical errors in that second copy of the book you already own, all you have is a more messed up copy of that original book. So things are not being taken forward, and all we see is devolution. The origin of species is better explained from a creationist, biblical-based model perspective, because we expect change, but we expect change based on information loss, and that's exactly what we see. I mean, I have a paper here that talks about functional DNA making the problem even worse. And the thing is, the evidence for genome-wide functionality is strong. It's preliminary, but the trajectory is strong. But this paper talks about that even if the genome is only 10% functional, evolution is impossible. And I think you would even agree that the genome is more than 10% functional, would you not?
It's probably about 10, maybe more.
Okay, so, well, for one, I think the evidence is outstanding for it being more than, because the thing is, how much do we know about the developmental process, for example, and that
a lot. And it confirms evolution, because on our embryonic stages we look like our past, we express basically genes that were present phenotypically in adults of our past ancestors.
But the thing is, so tell me, how does coding and non-coding DNA coordinate when, where, and how, these structures are sequentially put in place to produce a fully functional organism? Like, can you explain to me the step-by-step process on a molecular level on how you go, how the coding and non-DNA coding actually coordinate? I mean, they know very little because a lot of these genes, well, for one, you agreed that, knockout experiments for a mammal have yet to be performed. And yet you're saying that the genome is probably only 10% functional. I mean, isn't that kind of premature, Taylor?
No, it's based on mutation rates. So if mutation rates accumulate in the higher end of realistic levels, then what was the study saying? It basically just says that it's comparing mutation rates with a functional genome. So the higher the functional genome is, the more deleterious effects you'll find from mutation rate. And so we've predicted that there's a functional range of like 10 to 25% based on our ability to basically the breeding rate.
So are you saying that the genome can only be 10% functional, even though ENCODE revealed preliminary data? I'm not saying that it's 100% evidence, but it is preliminary that at least 80% of the genome is transcribed in RNA. So that at least suggests that the genome's not idle. And the fact that we know very little about the developmental process and how coding and non-DNA coding coordinate with each other. I mean, are you just saying that the genome has to be 10% functional because of this paper that says 10% or more completely destroys pond scum to people evolution? Like, because it seems like that type of belief is going to hinder scientific advancement, because now
no, because we don't make assumptions. We say that it's a prediction, and if it doesn't come true, then we go back to the model. We're researching the stuff, but that doesn't mean we get to go, oh well, just we don't know, therefore God did it. This is science. It constantly we went from the neutral theory of mutation accumulation to the nearly neutral theory, and now we know that they're only low impact, slightly deleterious, because most of these that we're talking about are occurring in the majority of the gene code, which is non-functional. Or it doesn't.
See, but the thing is, as I talked about earlier, portion
low impact because it's regulatory, and regulatory functions are very easy to up and down regulate with epigenetics, all kinds of different things.
Well, the thing is, ENCODE has actually revealed that most nucleotides play a role in multiple overlapping codes. So contrary to pond scum to people evolution, that actually makes any beneficial mutations, which are not deleterious at some level, vanishingly rare. And as I said earlier, portions of the genome involved specifically in embryological development were not evaluated. So systematic knockout experiments, as we're predicting based on the model of pre-existing heterozygosity, can only fully demonstrate this. So why don't we get into the lab and see which prediction involving the non-coding DNA regions are actually true? Because the thing is, if you're saying that the genome's only 10% functional, which I think that's just false, it's false, flat on its face, because the trajectory is already pointing to genome-wide functionality. We just need to perform these systematic knockout experiments to fully demonstrate that fact. So if you have to stick to the fact that, you want to believe the genome's only 10%, 20% functional, because even evolutionists are saying in secular papers that any more than that means that we would degenerate too fast, that evolution couldn't be true. But the thing is, like, you still haven't given any, I've given evidence from the 3 major haplogroups, low genetic diversity, 1 Y chromosome, 1 mitochondrial DNA, the fact that genes come in 2 versions. I mean, this is all predicted by the Bible thousands of years ago. I've given you a testable, falsifiable prediction from the catastrophic plate tectonics model, and I've shown you death, degeneration, and decay of the universe and the genome based on the account of Genesis and the fall. So you haven't given us any evidence yet. So did you want to spend some time giving some evidence for universal common descent there, Taylor?
Well, you have about 75 seconds to do that. So yeah, Taylor, go ahead, Taylor.
Yeah, you take your time. Give some evidence, brother, because the debate's almost done and you haven't given any. Go ahead.
I've already done that multiple times, but I don't really care. We also have back mutation, by the way, which can flip a gene back to its wild form. But I don't care.
Well, back mutations are rare, so.
We'll just let him finish that. Yeah,
okay, go ahead.
It doesn't really matter. It's a thing, because let's assume we started with all we're going to get, genetically speaking, and we developed from there, and we just devolved and lost information from there. That's still evolution, and you still can't provide anything that can resolve the biblical theory with what we find in the fossil record, because what we would actually find is an even distribution of all taxa.
You and SpongeBob need to start a college together.
And you can't find a mammal in the lower layers. You just can't.
All right, last 15 seconds.
Okay, so I hope the audience has been able to see that no actual evidence has been provided for the evolutionary model. So by default, I win. So this has been fun. But yeah, we'll go to our closing statements then, and I'll debunk what you just said there.
All right. Well, thank you both.
Give enough time, you can turn anything into anything. Yeah, it's true. It's true. All right. It's proven. You have the fossil record. It shows all the steps. First of all, fossils don't prove evolution. Okay? It's proven. You have the fossil record. It shows all the steps. Fossils don't prove evolution.
We have a very good set of bones saved from fossil records showing that the whales evolved through a long period of time from animals that were on land to animals that are in the water. Fossils don't mean anything as far as evolution is concerned. We don't need them. We got all the evidence we need to prove evolution without fossils. Forget fossils. They just aren't important. What's important is DNA. We have a very good set of bones saved from fossil records showing that the whales evolved through a long period of time from animals that were on land to animals that are in the water. Fossils don't mean anything as far as evolution is concerned. We don't need them.
What can we see? What examples do we have of evolution, regardless of the conditions, fast or slow? Please name your best one.
Well, we talk to the fossil record, right? We talk to the obvious existence of extinct and ancient life forms that have all the appearance, unless you believe a very complicated conspiracy theory, they have all the appearance of being millions of years old, right?
So the fossil record, the more we fill it in, the more complete it becomes and the more powerful it becomes as evidence for evolution.
Fossils don't prove evolution.
Fossils don't mean anything as far as evolution is concerned. We don't need them.
The similarity between a Honda Prelude and a Honda Accord are pretty striking.
Yes, they're from the same maker, Honda.
You got the point. You got